Hello, this is Eric. I have got a rebuilt vintage PC here. I believe this started life as a 286. So this sticker right here. But before I got a hold of it, some other upgrades had already been made. It had a relatively modern motherboard that's running an MMX processor, so that dates it around 1997. It had Windows 3.1 on it, but it had some old pieces left over, like this 5¼ inch drive you just saw. It had a 730 megabyte hard drive in it. The sound card was from 1988, which, given what it was, an ATI all-in-wonder from 1988. I mean, that was a very expensive card. It was a $500 or $600 card when it came out. It had 512 megabytes of RAM and had a serial port built into it for the mouse. Now, what I've done in rebuilding this as a Windows 98 gaming machine, first of all, I've kept this monster power supply. This is not ATX. I believe the connectors are LX connectors. It's 200 watt. The floppy drive was bad, so that's been replaced. That was a little interesting because you see this edge connector card here for the floppy. Turns out that's an adapter from the regular floppy 34 pins to the edge card, just so that this cable can be used. Could I do it without that? I could, except that on the 5¼ inch drive, I don't think that's an adapter. I think the 5¼ inch drive actually just only has an edge connector. What else did I do? I overclocked it. So this motherboard has jumpers on it, so you can do manual overclocking to basically trick it into thinking it's a different CPU and adjust the speed. So I went from 166 to 188 megahertz. It's rock steady. Now, as you can see, here's a CD audio in to the Sound Blaster. So this didn't have a sound card before, just this kind of large speaker. Most speakers these days on motherboards are just little buzzers, really. But this now has a nice Sound Blaster from the late 90s on it. What else is in here? That's the graphics card in the middle there. That is a ATI 3D Rage Pro Turbo. Turbo means nothing. It was a marketing term. What's important though is that this is an 8 megabyte card. It can easily go up to 24-bit color on a decent resolution, 1068, 1024 by 768. And then I added networking. That's an Intel networking card. And as you can tell, it's active right now. You see that light flashing there. And the hard drive has been upgraded as well. The hard drive is now, it's 120 gigabyte hard drive, dramatically faster than the one that was in there. Now I have the jumper set on it so that it is only seen as a 32 gigabyte hard drive. That's because of the limitations in Windows 98, 95 for that matter. You can't see anything beyond 32 gigabytes. So I did not go through the effort of partitioning the drive. So yes, I've wasted some drive space on it, but I think 32 gig is really plenty for the types of things that we would install on this machine. In the back here we have a serial port for the mouse, a 5-pin DIN port for the keyboard with an adapter to PS2. And then you just see the sound card with game port and VGA and networking. Now there are a bunch of other slots, but I don't really have anything appropriate to put into ISA slots. Anything would be really old, and I don't really care if I have a Opal 3 sound chip on my sound card or not. I'm happy enough with the emulation. We'll check that out in a second, actually, because I've got some software on it that I've just installed that we'll use that. We'll see what it sounds like. Now, memory on this particular system, this motherboard is interesting. It supports SIMMs and DIMMs. It came with 32 megabytes of SIMM memory, so I added 64 more megabytes of SIMMs. So 96 megabytes, and that's plenty. That is plenty for Windows 98. Alright, so let's see what's going on here. So in addition to gaming, I've got this on the network. Now usually I just hook things up to my network just so I can move files around internally on a little, I got a little switch, and I got my main computer and then various vintage machines hooked up to it as I'm working on them. Well, in this case, I found out about the proto-web. The proto-web runs a proxy server at wayback.protoweb.org on port 7851. What this is doing is letting Internet Explorer browse some sites. The sites available through the proto-web. And what they've done is they've cached a bunch of websites and served them straight from the 90s. It is a time machine. One of the things that it lets me do is play music. So yes, that's WINAMP. I'm playing a Shoutcast playlist, which I'm getting from this website through the proto-web. So this is a 90s channel. Play some good music. Gotta love the Foo Fighters. Let's see what else is in the proto-web here. Let's just do it this way. Come on. So there's a gateway for the proto-web, which shows me this directory and all the different websites that they've got cached away. Epic Mega Games. Woo, don't even know what that is. Live content. What this means is they're pulling in, like, I've got live news. This isn't the news from 1990. This is the news fed through their proxy server, and there you go, today's headline. And all the other headlines in this simplified form. What's nice is, it's fast. Obviously it's running on an insanely fast connection for this particular computer, and it works great. Here we go. Here's Garfield from today. Oh wow, and it's a joke about software updates. We'll share Garfield with you. What's he saying? Oh gosh, he's got a scale. That's what we need. Smart scales. So the proto-web is cool. I'm providing some real basic benchmarks here. Why? Well, benchmarks are hard to do, especially on 30, 35-year-old machines. Even the benchmarking software I was using, the same software, was giving me different tests for different versions of the hardware on the system. So what I've got here is the important stuff, the hard drive. I went from a 4,500 RPM hard drive to a 7,200 RPM hard drive at over 100 times the capacity. The buffered read speed went up about 50%, so nice huge jump there. The size of the cache on the drives was significantly different. Went from 128 kilobytes in one case up to an 8 megabyte cache on the modern drive. The access speed was about the same. There's some other metrics. Can't really tell you what they are. This linear verify read, only that this verify process was dramatically faster, like 12, 13, 14 times faster. So overall, much improvement. I did at one point have some other intermediate results that showed a lower memory bandwidth on this, not associated with the hard drive, but the memory. But at some point during this testing, I upgraded the motherboard drivers, and the memory bandwidth has jumped about 10% from that point. Now, we already know from the overclocking of the motherboard that the CPU speed has been raised about 13%. And this was because the front side bus speed has gone from 66 to 75 megahertz. And you get a nice boost from that and be able to play some games better. General processing faster. I'm starting the 3D bench test now. This just does a three-dimensional drawing, and it rotates it as quick as it can and gives you a frame rate for that when it's done, so you can compare relatively to other systems. So the actual test number down here. Alright, it's all done. That's the score, 24.3 frames per second. And this was running on this ISA graphics card. This is an ATI Wonder 16. Pretty interesting card. It's got a VGA output. It has a serial bus port for a mouse. The actual bus mouse 9-pin kind of round connector, not to be confused with PS2. And then it has a TTL serial port for connecting to, well, no, it's not serial. It's like a monitor port, but for really old monitors. It's for CGA and EGA monitors that didn't have the same pin as a modern VGA does. So we're going to switch to version 2 of this, which is the benchmark for faster PCs, and see if it can make sense of what's going on in the system. And if none of that works out right, then I'll just switch to the appropriate driver. You know, maybe I read it wrong before, but there we go. 110 frames per second, not 11 something frames per second. That makes much more sense. So a little over 4 times as fast just on the basic test. And this is without the drivers for the graphics card installed. Now we're done. All the upgrades are in. We see the improvement in CPU, hard drive speeds, fix some broken components, and of course the 3D graphics card is a huge improvement over the original basic frame buffer type of graphics card that was in the system before. This system is now ready to play some really good Windows 98 DirectX 7 games, as well as all the great DOS games.